sometime in 2018, in one of my engagements in my business school, my fine professor, a professor of mine, was explaining some concepts around the dynamic system of thinking and its impact on organizational growth. And by extension, he was talking about the impact of the rebound effect, the negative impact of that on the US economy. Subsequently, he went explaining the theory of reinforcing loop and how that has helped to propel growth in most of the European countries. And it was a very elaborate conversation. In the course of the engagement, he used several examples with some of the countries we have in the class that day. And these were fine, beautiful examples of how nations have leveraged technology for growth. And it was quite an amazing and an eye-opener session for most of the people in the class that day. Subsequently, he went also into the spread of diseases and how it could be contained using the same theory of reinforcing loop. And to buttress that, he went into the story of Ebola. And he used Ebola as an example on how the same theory could help and what World Health Organization was doing then and the few consulting they were doing for the World Health Organization. God knows in that class, I was just in there to consume. I made up my mind that I was just going to sit, I was going to learn, I was going to write, but I had no intention to have any insight whatsoever. Right there where I was sitting, I heard a very loud cry from the back of the class when one of my other professors mentioned to say, by the way, Adewale is from West Africa, and he should be able to tell us more about reinforcing loop and the spread of Ebola. So in my mind, I said, I have several other examples I could give. Why Ebola? After listening to the fantastic story from Sweden and most of the European countries on how they've used the same theory to practically eradicate the housing challenges that they have in Sweden, how some of them have used technology through water reticulation to solve some basic problems of humanity. Of course, I graciously accepted the offer, and I think I did justice explaining how the spread of Ebola could have been contained with another theory of balancing loop. When I was done, I was thanked for my brilliant delivery, and I was requested to go have a seat. Then I said, I have one more example. And my professor made a mistake of accepting me to go ahead and give the example. Then I told them the African story. I told them about the asset and the leverage that we have in Africa. I told them about the pace and the growth of technology. I told them about world creation and how investors, PE funds and VCs are coming back to Africa. I explained to them the cultural part of technology. A few of them were standing by the time I finished. And of course, the professor took it up and expatiated what I was talking about. For another 25 minutes, I had the opportunity to present the African story. Of course, during lunch, my table was full because I had several people that had 1,000 questions on what they wanted to know about Africa. So when I got back from that session, fast forward 2 years after, and the concept of tech excellence came up, it was a no-brainer that we had to jump on it. Telling the African story, leveraging technology, not just for world creation and organizational growth, but more for nation building. A very big thank you to you all for joining us at the third edition of Tech Excellence. As you may be aware, it is a technology and a digital innovation gathering where we discuss matters and topical issues that propel digital growth, enablement, wealth creation, and partnership within the private and, of course, the government sector. Conversation started 3 years ago with focus on Nigeria, subsequently to Sub-Saharan Africa and by extension Africa last year. However, with the lineup of speakers and delegates and panelists that we have at this year's conference, it's obvious that the perspective and the narrative might be slightly different. As I've been introduced, my name is Adewale Adeyipo. I call myself the lead convener. And my business, of course, is technology. However, technology as an enabler for business success, technology as an enabler for economic growth and for national development. And I welcome you all today to Tech Excellence 2024. Also, if you're in this conference venue with us today, or you're joining through any of the platforms that we have provided at this year's conference, and you're playing within the technology and digital innovation value chain in any industry in Africa, I want to particularly commend you for the incredible job that you're doing, directly or indirectly, to promote technology deployment and adoption in this continent. Of course, leveraging your respective offices, closing the digital divide, while also enhancing social prosperity in Africa. I must say that the great and the amazing work you're doing has produced the foundation for a robust and an inclusive Africa that we see today, and with greater prospects emerging. I also think evidence of that can be seen today in our everyday life and in the many viable industries that technology has been able to enhance in the last 2 decades. Healthcare, digital banking and payment, telecommunication, to mention a few. In the 10 minutes that's been allotted to me today, as part of my welcome remark, I'll speak very briefly into something that I consider as one of the most fundamental factors, or what you could call a critical pillar for economic advancement in most emerging nations. And that is technology and digital innovation, but this time as a tool for nation building. You see, globally, the categorization of nations into advanced, emerging, or frontiers are largely based on certain economic indices and variables, like the per capita income, a varied export base, the integration of this nation's financial sector into the global financial systems, and a few other variables that you might be familiar with. I presume this has been for a while, and might continue like that for the future that we could see. However, a new metrics entirely, an entirely new metrics is coming into this mix, and that is technology deployment and e-government have become a major differentiator in the subcategorization of emerging nations into secondary emerging and advanced emerging. The use of technological tools by these nations with the sole aim of improving lives, information, service delivery, encouraging citizens' participation in the decision-making process, thereby making government more transparent, accountable, reliable, and of course, trusted. We're seeing by pattern how the growth and the strength of nations and viable industries, both in advanced and in emerging economy, almost directly tally with their appetite for technology and digital innovation consumption. Technology is influencing the categorization of nations and their economic viability. It has become more like a democratized oil block, and the value is immeasurable. Great nations, as I saw in my class that day, with the many examples being given from Europe and Asia, great nations, especially emerging nations, are leveraging it, revealing tomorrow. It has become a driving force behind societal progress, with emerging nations, for example, like China, leveraging technology to improve the life expectancy of its citizens from 35 years in the 50s to 65 in the 80s and 78 in 2021, largely due to advancements in health tech. Japan, where train stations in Tokyo are harnessing energy from commuters to generate power. Singapore, as I was discussing with Frederick just before I came up in here, through the Smart Nation Singapore initiative, where government is also leveraging the use of technology as an enabler to improve the life of its people. You see, as I close, so we could listen to our fine speakers, there are many global troubles and challenges in the world today that we might not have 100% control over. Global warming, global recession and inflation, unrest, protest, the rise of the populism, cultural clash, and social polarization. However, within our control will be the pace and the growth of technology advancement in our nations. And that is the next big thing that must be a focus in Africa. Beyond individual growth, beyond organizational growth, beyond wealth creation, we must begin to see and leverage technology for nation building. Building with the end in mind, clearly understanding that, yes, within this ecosystem is wealth, but within this ecosystem also is enablement. Just the same way we've done in payments and in banking today, I could imagine opening up the pipe and expanding that pipe through other verticals, supply chain, e-commerce, healthcare. I said, our pace and appreciation of technology might just be limited to what policies and regulation might allow us to do. So there must be a point, there must be that deliberate integration within the public and the private sector that embrace creativity and allow such to thrive. That's the essence of tech excellence. So in this year's conference, we'll talk about the why, the how, the gaps, the people, the process. We'll talk about the blueprints. We'll talk about the place of policies and regulation, which I strongly believe is a catalyst for development as one of the drivers of economy in this nation. All this we'll discuss in details. We'll talk about the forward integration in governance, and that will be a major impact to the spread and the growth of technology to other verticals. We will speak into the place of safety nets in order for creativity to thrive. These and many more are the expectation at this year's Tech Excellence. Digital infrastructure will continue to be a major impact if we must scale. Digital literacy, integrated into the fabric of our education, then becomes a major conversation also that we must have. Deliberate partnership within the private and the government sector becomes something important that must be on the top 3 agenda in most of our conversation. We are just as fast in the private sector as what regulation allow us to be able to fulfill. So it's not a case of creativity within the private sector. It's more of a deliberate attempt within both entities to ensure that we scale in the proportion of what we deserve, going by our asset and leverage in this continent. Again, I want to thank you for coming. This is the 3rd edition, and it keeps getting better every year. I will be at some point coming back also to discuss 1 or 2 things, but until then, I'll leave you in the hands of the beautiful men and ladies that we have at this year's conference. Thank you so much, and I wish you a fantastic time at the 3rd edition of Tech Excellence 2024. Thank you.